The mountains rose like ancient sentinels above the small town of Willow Creek, silent, mist-wrapped, and eternal. To most, they were simply a breathtaking backdrop to quiet lives. To others, they held secrets best left undisturbed. And among those secrets was a man, Elias Kane. The recluse who lived where the tree line thinned and the world turned wild. Elias had lived alone for nearly a decade. His cabin, hand-built from pine logs and stone, stood beside a rushing creek miles beyond the last dirt road. Few had ever visited, and fewer still had dared to speak with him. The townsfolk called him the Mountain Man, though the nickname carried more fear than respect. Children were told not to wander too far lest they meet the hermit of the hills. Adults whispered his name in the same tone they used for old tragedies, quiet. Regretful and uncertain rumors filled the silence he left behind. Some said he'd killed a man in a brawl. Others claimed he'd lost his mind after his wife's mysterious death. Whatever the story, all ended the same. Elias Kane was a man to be avoided. And so, year after year, he became more myth than flesh, a shadow moving among the pines. But the truth was far simpler and far sadder. Elias had not sought solitude to escape justice, but to escape the noise of the world, the pitying looks, the whispered accusations, the pain of memory that never dulled. Once he had been a craftsman, strong, kind, quick to laugh. He built furniture, carved toys for children, and played the fiddle at town gatherings. He had a wife, Lydia, whose laughter could soften the hardest day. They had dreamed of raising a family in the valley below the mountains. That dream ended one winter night when Lydia, heavy with child, fell ill and passed before dawn. The town's doctor couldn't save her, and grief swallowed Elias whole. He left without a word. The cabin he built deep in the mountains became both his refuge and his prison. The days turned into years, marked only by the rhythm of seasons, chopping wood, hunting deer, repairing his roof when storms tore through. His only companions were the creatures of the forest. The wolves kept their distance. The birds did not. He spoke to them sometimes, his voice rough from disuse. It was not madness, only loneliness echoing into the trees. Elias had grown into his solitude like the mountain itself, rugged, weathered, and immovable. His beard was thick and streaked with gray. His eyes, though stern at first glance, held a quiet sorrow that spoke of too many winters survived. To those who glimpsed him from afar, carrying a freshly felled log or walking the frozen creek, he looked like a relic of another time. A man carved out of stone and grief. Yet beneath the beard, beneath the silence and the scars, Elias still carried a gentleness that refused to die. He fed the stray dog that wandered up to his cabin one spring. He tended to a wounded hawk, nursing it back to health before setting it free. When the storms came, he left bowls of grain under the porch for hungry birds. Acts of kindness unseen by any human eye, but enough to keep a spark of humanity alive in him. In town, his name faded from conversation, replaced by new gossip, new worries. But sometimes, on clear mornings, smoke from his chimney could be seen curling up through the evergreens. A quiet sign that the mountain man still lived, still fought the ghosts that refused to leave him. Townsfolk might have forgotten the man he once was, but the mountains hadn't. They knew his heart. Buried, though, it was beneath layers of grief and time. And soon, someone new, someone with her own broken pieces, would climb those slopes and see what no one else had dared to look for. The gentle soul beneath the beard. The first snowfall of November had barely melted when Clara Jennings arrived in Willow Creek. Her small car packed with boxes and a hope she didn't quite dare to name. The little town nestled between towering evergreens and misty peaks seemed like a picture from another time. Slow, quiet, untouched, it was exactly what she needed. She had come from the city, where the noise never stopped and the memories chased her through every crowded street. Clara had once been a journalist, good at it, too, until a betrayal from someone she trusted left her heart fractured and her career hanging by a thread. So when she saw an old cottage for rent at the edge of town, she packed her things and drove until the skyline gave way to mountains to the locals. She was a curiosity at first, the new girl from the city, polite but reserved, always carrying a notebook. She asked questions about the town's history, the local wildlife, and the trails that wound up into the hills. Some were happy to talk. Others warned her gently, "You don't want to go too far up those trails." "Miss," the grocer told her one morning, "there's a man up there. Keeps to himself, best leave him be." Clara smiled and nodded. But curiosity has a way of growing roots in quiet hearts. She first heard the name Elias Kane from Mrs. Hartley, the elderly librarian who offered her tea one rainy afternoon. "He was a fine man once," Mrs. Hartley said, lowering her voice. "Lost everything, poor soul. People said he changed after that. Built himself a cabin in the woods and never came back down." She sighed, stirring sugar into her tea. "They say he's dangerous. But I don't believe that just broken. The word lingered in Clara's mind like the echo of a bell. She knew that kind of pain, the kind that makes you build walls so high no one can climb them over the next few weeks. Clara settled into her new life. She spent mornings walking through the frost-kissed fields and afternoons by her cottage window, writing in long bursts. The mountains became her muse, vast, unyielding, and strangely comforting. Sometimes she caught sight of a thin line of smoke far up the slopes, curling into the pale sky. Once she even thought she saw a figure, tall, broad, moving through the trees with a purposeful grace. She dismissed it as her imagination, but her curiosity deepened one morning. Clara decided to explore beyond the main trail. The locals had warned her, but adventure tugged at her heart. The forest was still, the air sharp and alive. She walked for hours, following the distant sound of running water, until the path faded into undergrowth. That was when she saw it, a small clearing with a crude wooden fence, a stack of freshly chopped logs, and the faint scent of smoke. She didn't see him at first when Elias appeared from behind the trees, carrying an axe and a bundle of firewood. Her breath caught. He was larger than life, broad shoulders beneath a worn flannel, a dark beard hiding most of his face. But it was his eyes that held her, piercing, tired, but not cruel. He looked more startled than angry to find her there. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. His voice rough from disuse. "I'm sorry," Clara stammered. "I got lost." Elias studied her for a moment, then sighed and pointed toward the trail. "Follow the creek, it'll take you back." That was all. No threat, no harshness. Just a man who wanted to be left alone. But as Clara turned to leave, she noticed something, a small wooden carving on the porch, shaped like a bird with its wings outstretched. The craftsmanship was delicate, almost tender. That night, back in her cottage, she couldn't stop thinking about it, about him. The mountain man the town feared didn't seem dangerous at all. He seemed lonely, and for reasons she didn't yet understand. Clara felt an ache in her chest, a quiet urge to know more about the man who lived among the trees and spoke with a voice that carried both strength and sorrow. The storm came without warning. One moment the afternoon sky was pale and calm. The next, it had turned dark and furious, clouds rolling over the peaks like angry beasts. Clara had gone farther into the woods than usual, hoping to capture the first blush of autumn in her sketches. When the wind picked up and the rain began to fall in heavy sheets, she realized, too late, how far she'd wandered. Her boots slipped on the wet leaves as she tried to retrace her steps, her heart pounding faster than the rain. Every tree looked the same now, every path swallowed by mist. She called out once, but the sound vanished into the roar of the storm by the time she stumbled upon the small cabin again. The same one she'd seen weeks earlier. She was drenched, shivering, and half certain she'd lost her way for good. Smoke rose weakly from the chimney, and through the fog she saw light flickering behind the window. She hesitated. The memory of their first meeting flashed in her mind. His stern voice, his warning to stay away, but the thunder cracked above her, and fear overruled caution. Gathering her courage, she knocked for a long moment. Nothing happened. Then the door opened. Elias stood there, silent as ever, his flannel shirt rolled to his elbows. Rain dripping from his beard, his expression was unreadable. "You again," he said quietly. I got caught in the storm," Clara stammered, hugging her arms for warmth. "I didn't know where else to go." He studied her for a long beat before stepping aside. "Come in." The cabin was small but warm, the scent of pine and wood smoke wrapping around her like a blanket. A fire burned steadily in the hearth. She could hear the rain hammering against the roof, but inside, everything felt still, almost sacred. Elias handed her a towel. Without a word, she thanked him softly, her voice trembling more from nerves than cold. He busied himself at the stove, heating water in a battered kettle. "You shouldn't walk these trails alone," he said finally. "They change quick when the weather turns." "I'm starting to see that," she replied. Managing a faint smile, he glanced at her, just for a second, and she thought she saw something soften in his eyes when he handed her a steaming mug of tea. She noticed the scars on his hands, long, pale lines that told stories she couldn't yet know. "You made this place yourself," she said, glancing around. The walls were lined with wooden carvings, birds, deer, even a delicate rose. Elias gave a small nod. "Built it after everything." The way his voice caught on that word made her heart ache. She didn't press him. Instead, she traced one of the carvings with her gaze, a mother bear and her cub. The details were intricate, full of care. "You're an artist," she said softly. He almost smiled. "No, just a man with time." That was how it began. The uneasy companionship of two lonely souls. For the next few hours they talked in short bursts between silences that weren't uncomfortable. Clara told him about the city, about losing her job and her faith in people. Elias listened, his expression unreadable but his attention steady. When the rain finally eased, he walked her to the trail. The world outside was silver with mist, the forest dripping with light. "Thank you," she said, turning to face him for the tea and the shelter. Elias shrugged lightly, but his voice was quiet when he answered. "You should come down before dark next time." "I will," she promised, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to leave at all. As she made her way back to town, Clara glanced over her shoulder one last time. He was still standing by the doorway, a tall, solitary figure framed by the soft glow of his cabin fire. Something inside her shifted, a quiet certainty that their paths would cross again. Not by accident this time, but by choice, and somewhere deep in the mountains, Elias Kane watched her disappear into the trees, feeling for the first time in years the faint stirrings of something he thought he'd buried forever, hope. Winter crept into Willow Creek quietly, wrapping the valley in white and silence. Clara had been in town nearly 3 months now, and though she told herself she came to write and recover, she found her steps drifting toward the mountain more often than not. Each visit to Elias's cabin began as an accident, a new trail to explore, a sketch to finish, but soon pretense wasn't needed. Elias didn't ask why she kept coming. He simply started keeping an extra mug on the shelf and more firewood by the door. Their conversations grew longer, less guarded. Sometimes they talked about small things, the animals he tracked, the stars above the ridges, the taste of wild berries. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the crackle of the fire. It was in those quiet moments that Clara began to truly see him, not as the mysterious mountain man the town whispered about, but as a man carrying the weight of too much sorrow. One afternoon, as snow fell softly outside, she noticed Elias staring at a small wooden box on the mantel. His expression had changed, distant, haunted. Without thinking, she asked, Who was she? He froze, his jaw tightening. Who? The woman in that picture, she said gently, nodding toward a faded photograph propped against the box. It showed a younger Elias with a woman whose eyes sparkled like sunlight on water. Clara's voice softened. Your wife? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he exhaled slowly, the sound heavy with years of unspoken pain. Her name was Lydia, he said at last. She was everything. He sat down, his gaze fixed on the flames. Words came haltingly, as though he'd locked them away long ago. We married young. I built this cabin for her. She loved the mountains. Said they made her feel close to God. When she found out she was pregnant, it was the happiest I'd ever seen her. He paused, his voice rough. Then winter came early that year. The snow trapped us in. She fell ill, and the doctor couldn't make it in time. Clara's throat tightened. She died before dawn, he continued, his tone low, almost a whisper, and the baby never had a chance. He swallowed hard. The town blamed me, said I shouldn't have brought her up here. Maybe they were right. Silence filled the cabin. Thick and aching, Clara's heart broke for him, not just for what he had lost, but for how long he had carried that guilt alone. They weren't right, she said softly. You loved her. That's not something to be ashamed of. Elias's eyes lifted to hers, a flicker of pain and disbelief crossing his face. He wasn't used to kindness. Not anymore. Clara reached out, hesitated, then rested her hand over his. His skin was rough and calloused, but the warmth beneath it was real. You didn't kill her, Elias. You survived her. There's a difference. For a moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled, and outside, the snow fell in a hush that seemed to bless the world. Something shifted between them then. Not romance, not yet, but trust. A fragile bridge built from shared silence and understanding. In the days that followed, Clara saw more of the man behind the beard. Elias showed her how to track animal prints in the snow, how to read the clouds for weather. She helped him repair a broken window and brought books from the library for him to read. Slowly, laughter began to return to the cabin, soft, uncertain, but real. But with every step forward, Clara sensed the shadow that still lingered behind his eyes, the part of him that refused to forgive himself. She wanted to help him heal, yet she feared pushing too hard would send him retreating into silence again one evening. As she left his cabin under a sky full of stars, she glanced back and saw him watching from the porch. For the first time, he wasn't just the mountain man. He was Elias, a man reclaiming his life, one fragile heartbeat at a time, and though neither of them spoke it aloud, they both felt the truth settling quietly between them. They were no longer just two broken souls crossing paths. They were becoming each other's reason to hope again. By the time spring reached Willow Creek, the snow had melted into wildflowers, and the mountain once again hummed with life. The air smelled of pine and thawing earth, and Clara found herself more often at Elias's cabin than in her own cottage. What began as cautious visits had become part of her days, tea shared on the porch, laughter echoing between the trees. Long walks through the forest trails where silence said more than words ever could. The town noticed at first. It was small things, curious glances at the cafe, whispered remarks when Clara walked past with her sketchbook. But in a place as small as Willow Creek, whispers spread like wildfire. Did you hear? That woman's been up there again. They say she's keeping company with him. Poor girl. Doesn't she know what he did? Clara tried to ignore it. She'd heard the talk, but she also knew the truth. The man she had come to know was nothing like the stories the town told. Still, the gossip wore on her like tiny stones eroding her peace. When Mrs. Hartley, the kind old librarian, warned her gently, "People here don't forget, dear. Be careful who you trust," Clara only smiled sadly. Sometimes people deserve to be remembered for more than their mistakes. She replied, but not everyone was kind one afternoon. While buying supplies, Clara overheard two men talking near the counter. "That city woman's a fool," one of them said. "Elias Kane's a murderer. She'll end up like his wife." The words cut deep, not because she believed them, but because she realized how firmly the town's fear had rooted itself. They didn't want Elias redeemed. They wanted him to stay the villain in their story that evening. She climbed the mountain trail faster than usual, anger and sadness twisting inside her. When she reached the cabin, Elias was splitting wood by the stream. She called out to him, breathless. "They're still talking about you," she said, frustration rising in her voice. "They think you're dangerous, that I'm foolish for being here. It's not fair." Elias set down the axe, his expression unreadable. "Let them talk. How can you be so calm?" she demanded. "You don't deserve their hatred." He looked at her for a long moment, the quiet around them heavy. "Clara, I stopped fighting them a long time ago," he said finally. "People need their monsters. It helps them sleep at night." She stepped closer. "You're not a monster." His eyes hardened, not in anger, but in resignation. "Maybe not. But I failed, Lydia. That's all they'll ever see." The distance between them suddenly felt enormous. Clara wanted to reach out, to make him see the man she saw, the one who saved birds, who carved beauty from wood, who carried guilt like a cross he didn't deserve. But Elias turned away, his voice low and rough. "You should stay away for a while," he said. "The more they talk, the harder it'll be for you." Her chest tightened. "You're pushing me away." "I'm protecting you," he said. "This town doesn't forgive, and I won't let you get hurt because of me." His words stung more than she expected. "You're not protecting me, Elias. You're hiding again, for a heartbeat." Silence filled the clearing, thick with things unsaid. Then he picked up the axe again, signaling the conversation was over. Clara left, tears blurring the trail. The forest, once her refuge, now felt cold and indifferent. She didn't look back this time. In the days that followed, she kept to herself. The town's whispers grew louder. Elias's cabin stood silent. Neither reached out. The bond they had built, so fragile and precious, seemed to crumble under the weight of old wounds and new fears. But fate, like the mountains, has its own sense of timing. It began with smoke, dark and sudden, rising from the far side of the ridge. A wildfire, fierce and fast-moving, sparked by lightning. As flames devoured the forest, the town rallied to fight it. But word spread quickly. Elias Kane was still up there, and as Clara stood among the worried faces in the square, she realized something with crystal clarity. She could not lose him too, whatever the town thought. Whatever danger lay ahead, she knew where she had to go. Back to the mountains. Back to him. The wildfire tore through the mountains like a living beast. The wind howled through the valleys, carrying the sharp scent of smoke and ash. From the town below, the people of Willow Creek watched the orange glow spread along the ridges, and for the first time in years, fear for the mountain man replaced their fear of him. Clara didn't wait for permission or reason. She grabbed a flashlight, a scarf for her face, and started up the trail. The sheriff tried to stop her, shouting that it was too dangerous, but she only shouted back, "He's still up there," and kept climbing. The smoke thickened as she went, but determination burned hotter than the fire itself. Branches cracked underfoot. Embers rained from the trees, but she pressed on, guided by the faint hope that Elias was still alive. When she reached the clearing, her heart seized. The cabin roof was smoldering, half collapsed. For a moment, she thought she was too late. Then she saw him. Elias emerged from the tree line, carrying a wounded fawn in his arms, his shirt torn and face streaked with soot. His eyes widened when he saw her. "Clara? What are you doing here?" He shouted over the roar of the flames, "I came for you." She cried, "You have to come down now." He shook his head, breath ragged. "I can't. There are animals trapped deeper in the woods. I can't just leave them." Even in the chaos, even surrounded by fire, his first thought wasn't of himself. It was of saving something helpless. Clara's throat tightened. That was the man no one in town had ever seen, the man beneath the beard, the one with a heart gentler than the world deserved. "Then I'm not leaving without you," she said fiercely for a moment. They just stared at each other, the storm of flame and smoke around them, and something stronger between them, unspoken but understood. Then Elias nodded, surrendering to her stubborn courage. Together they carried what they could: the fawn, a few frightened dogs, and a sack of Elias's carvings, and started down the mountain asterisk. The descent was brutal. Trees crashed nearby, fire licking at the undergrowth. At one point, Clara stumbled, nearly falling, but Elias caught her, shielding her from falling debris. His arm wrapped around her shoulders. Strong and steady, when they finally broke through the smoke into the open valley, firefighters rushed forward, shouting orders. Clara gasped for air as Elias set the animals down and collapsed to his knees. His hands trembled, his chest heaving. The people of Willow Creek, who had long avoided even speaking his name, now stood staring, not at a monster, but at a man who had risked his life to protect the mountain they all called home. The sheriff helped him up. "You saved those animals?" he asked, disbelief softening into respect. Elias just nodded, too exhausted to speak. But in that moment, the town's judgment seemed to falter, replaced by something else. Understanding, maybe even shame. Clara stepped beside him, taking his soot-covered hand in hers. "This is who he is," she said quietly to the watching crowd. "This is the man you've all misunderstood." The silence that followed was deep, not awkward, but reverent. Someone began to clap. Then another. Soon, the air filled with the sound of hands meeting, cheers rising louder than the dying fire behind them. In the days that followed, the town came together to rebuild what the fire had taken. Elias's cabin was gone, but the people, those who once turned their backs, helped him cut new lumber, offered food, tools, even laughter. For the first time in years, he was not alone as spring returned. Clara and Elias built a new cabin together, this one closer to town, its windows wide to catch the morning light. He carved again, not out of grief this time, but out of peace. Clara wrote about him, not as the mountain man or the hermit, but as Elias Kane, the man who taught her that healing sometimes begins in silence and ends in love on the porch of their new home, beneath a sky scrubbed clean by rain. Clara reached for his hand. The mountain breeze carried the scent of pine and promise. "You don't have to be alone anymore," she whispered. Elias smiled, a real smile, soft and unguarded. "I'm not," he said, and for the first time in a decade. He looked at the horizon not as a place to hide, but as a place to begin again, with her,